Welcome to the Sensitive Mind Show.
Your purpose in life as a sensitive. Hello there are some people born in this world with a sensitized nervous system. Some of them are naturally more intuitive than others. They feel others' emotions vividly but silently. These really are their stories. So, hello, I have 2 family and 1 partner relationship dynamics for you today. So the first one that we are looking at is Caitlin is asking how to stay motivated through tougher aspects of her internal change. Okay, so we have Caitlin. We also have Alison, who is a life code 5, and she wants to help with her husband and her son to form a better connection and relationship. And we have dilemma number 3, which is Rose, who is a life code 6. And Rose is struggling with a variety of health imbalances due to prolonged stress and wants help around regaining her health. So let's get into the first dilemma of today, which is Caitlin. And Caitlin is a life code 110. Okay, so I'm going to put Caitlin as a life code 110 up here as the whole self. We also have her mother, who is a life code 7. She'll pop there. And we have her father, who is a life code 5. So Caitlin wants to know how she can move forward through her current relationship and health difficulties. Okay, so we'll pop those there. Life code 5. Right. Let's have a look at what it is that Caitlin wants me to have a look at and see how her mother and father feature in her dilemma. Okay, so in 2013, I started loving and being kind to myself. I lost 80 pounds. That's a lot of weight. Now, unfortunately, regained. I visited a friend in America and met people. I had many wonderful spiritual experiences. Then in 2015, I learned about narcissism and realized that what had happened in my childhood with my mother. So what's the problem the situation creates? First, I went into anger. I did a lot of research and internal work, but since May 2016, I have been crying every single day. I found a psychologist and Reiki healer, but they both dropped me within a week at the end of August. And at that time, my back went into spasm and I could not move. So what is the question that she would like me to help her with? How do I motivate myself to carry on? Is there anything specific I need to do? Is this relationship ever going to happen? So Caitlin wants a good romantic relationship. She's not currently in a relationship, so she'd like to know whether that actually will happen in terms of some of the issues that she has to deal with. First off, from her question, what she's asking, which is that she's realised that since learning about narcissism, that her mother has some of those tendencies which have impacted her through her life. So I would say the first key thing we need to really look at as far as Caitlin is concerned, because we're in a 110 year. Okay, so we're in this energy of a 110 of new beginnings. So this is the year for Caitlin to feel as though she has a new beginning, and certainly a new beginning with herself. So I've put her into this 110 position at the top here as the whole self, because she's got a wider perspective of where her troubles, where her upset may have originated from. So generally, what do we have in terms of the life code dynamic between a 110 who's aware and an unaware life code 7? So this is really what Caitlin is asking. How do I deal with this? if I've got an unaware life code 7 mother who has had narcissistic traits, or realised that she had narcissistic traits during her early life experience. Now, the thing is, when someone has narcissistic traits, do we see them purely as self-absorbent? So they're completely self-absorbed, or, sprucing themselves in the mirror. That's really what most people would kind of flippantly say narcissism is. But narcissism, in terms of a close dynamic, especially the closest one that really should be there as our foundation and our formation in life, between mother and child. If that feels disrupted, yes, of course, that's going to have a grieving effect in terms of what Caitlin is experiencing. Now, as a 110 and a life code 7, how does that dynamic show? Well, an unaware life code 7 mother will be very emotional. So people with narcissistic tendencies, narcissistic characteristics, which is always putting themselves first ahead of anybody else, is that as a life code 7, those will be very dramatized. So I would say, most likely, every time Caitlin has tried to approach anything as far as the mother is concerned, it will become heavily dramatized from the mother towards her. Okay, so as that life code 7 dynamic, which is, whoa, unaware life code 7, explosive, very strong emotions, especially when challenged, as a life code 110, where life code 110s are the only life codes who is split between two different aspects of the self, which is how they experience themselves in the everyday world and their deeper knowledge, deeper meaning in life. So Caitlin has moved into the 110 of deeper knowledge, deeper meaning. So she needs something deeper in her life. Hence this new knowledge of what a narcissistic character is gives her insight into her early life experience. So Caitlin needs depth now in her life as that 110. She'll be looking for aspects of depth, especially in this year of 110 in terms of new beginnings. So the question is she going to be able to heal that dynamic between herself and her mother? I suspect not, but how can she come to terms with that so she can feel more comfortable about moving on to allow a romantic relationship in her life where she doesn't feel upset and doesn't feel that there is a possibility of that person abandoning her? Because quite often, we find ourselves without a relationship if we have a really strong fear of abandonment or choosing inappropriate relationships, because if we've got strong fear of abandonment, it's easy not to get too involved with someone. But clearly Caitlin is at that experience in her life where she has enough self-knowledge to want to move beyond that. So what we need to have a look at is, how can Caitlin move beyond the troublesome scenario of her emotional interaction with her mother? So how does a life code 5 come into that as far as this parental dynamic? Well, Caitlin hasn't physically mentioned her father, other than what would be key is whether we can see if there are any father type things which also holds her back from an emotional interaction with a romantic relationship. Now, a life code 110 and a life code 5 kind of matched with a life code 7. Unaware, you could end up with a life code 5 and a life code 7 tag teaming and ganging up on a life code 110. Could find that. Why? Well, it then deflects from their own situation and their own, and looking at themselves. So sometimes you do find that a life code 5 and a life code 7 will, if they've got a third person to gang up on, as unaware life codes, they will do that. They will gang up on that person. Why? Because ultimately a life code 5 and a life code 7 together don't usually get on. But if they have an external focus to place their direction on, especially if it's unkind or unsavory, that becomes a focus so they don't have to look at themselves. So we'll have a look to see whether there is any energy, as far as that's concerned, around Caitlin that she would do well to be aware of, so that she can start to feel at peace with herself, and be able to heal these painful emotions that she's going through at this point in her life. Okay, so I'm going to have a look from my, just bear with me a second, giant stack of archetypes. So we're going to have a look through the archetypes to see what we're looking at. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to have a look at Caitlin and see what's going on in her energy at this time that is creating all this upset. What is her psyche trying to release? Obviously, it's grieving around a realization that her mother's characteristics are something that's very real, as in she's identified that other people behave in this particular way. So now her body almost has permission, I would say, to grieve and release. So let's have a look to see what it's up to as far as that's concerned, where she's at, and maybe when she's going to have some relief from that releasing of pain. Let's have a look. So, thinking of Caitlin, let's have a look and see what we've got. Okay, so interestingly, we've got the Prince. So, this is interesting because how does this show as far as this is concerned? Well, already we can see, because we have the Prince here, there is going to be some father involvement. But I suspect how that this will show in what Caitlin's body is trying to release is the fact that she's felt let down by the Prince. Is a rescuer. It's someone, it's this line of protection. Who's going to protect me? Who's going to look after me? Well, I suspect that what Caitlin is releasing is the fact that she will feel that this life code 5 father of hers did not communicate or support her, and did not support her when she was dealing with a difficult mother. And so Caitlin's core self is trying to release the fact that she doesn't feel supported by a male. Hence the reason why at this particular moment in time it's tricky for her to find herself emotionally involved in a relationship. So I suspect right now what is happening is that even though it feels uncomfortable, it feels painful, that she's been crying for a long time, and yes, you would say, well, surely is that a line of depression or along those lines? Well, it could well be that the core of her is releasing this pain, that actually the deep pain is that she never felt protected. That she didn't feel protected and doesn't feel protected by a male energy, so now finding it hard in her life as an adult to allow that male relationship in. Okay, so let's see if I'm right as far as that's concerned and see what we get as far as the father is concerned. So bear with me whilst we do a big shuffle. Okay, so now I'm thinking about Caitlin and I'm thinking about the dynamic as far as her father is concerned. Let's see what we have. We have the priest. Now that's interesting. So I would say what Caitlin's experience of her father was in her early stages of her life will have been that her father wasn't emotionally present, wasn't emotionally available. Now, quite often you get that around an unaware life code 5. Why? Because they reflect the warrior. Okay, the warrior has to be self-sufficient, it is there for short periods of time. It's that kind of doesn't like to show weakness. So quite often, people are brought up or brought through generations in their lifetime, where it's unmanly to experience too much emotion, to show too much emotion, to be too emotionally present. It's almost as though that's somehow some kind of weakness. I suspect that this is what has been around Caitlin as far as her father is concerned. So yes, I would say with this priest here that it's highly likely that this is what Caitlin is actually grieving, is that she felt her father was emotionally unavailable, certainly not present, because a priest is isolated, in order for her to feel protected and therefore deal with the aggravation as far as her mother is concerned. So I think now what we'll have a look at is the mother's energy, is that life code 7, because I don't think it's ever going to change. Quite often with narcissistic temperaments, it's about learning how to manage those people, because their deep fear is ever being found out, that they are actually deeply insecure. So they will hide that by a top layer of unpleasantries. And I would say for Caitlin, a mother would be too far gone as far as that's concerned. In order for any line of confrontation, I would say that's probably not a good place for Caitlin to tackle it from, because this is about Caitlin now healing. Okay, so let's have a look to see what aspect of Caitlin's mother does her psyche need to begin to accept in order for her to heal. Let's have a look at it from that perspective. So I'm thinking about Caitlin and this dynamic, and let's have a look and see what we get. What is that line of acceptance? Okay, we've got the prostitute here, which is really quite interesting. So this is interesting because it shows in two different areas. So what it suggests, first of all, is the prostitute archetype is about how you sell yourself into the external world. So we can be very clear here that Caitlin's mother sells herself out into the world. She'd sell someone's soul if it was worthy, if it had a price attached to it that was really quite okay for her to do. And I would say probably at some point or another, Caitlin has felt that. She has felt that pretty much her mother's sort of sold her soul, metaphorically speaking. What does it mean as far as Caitlin is concerned? It's about her adjusting how she feels that she has to adjust herself consistently to be agreeable to somebody else. So if Caitlin can own this energy and her upset around that this constant upset about having to always adjust into something acceptable, and that whatever she wasn't acceptable as far as mother is concerned, actually had nothing to do with Caitlin. It is not reflective of who Caitlin is or was as in her younger years, and it was everything to do with her mother's perception of the world, and nothing actually personal towards Caitlin, even though that's a hard thing to be comfortable with. But sometimes when we can acknowledge those things and the kind of rawness of those things, and allow ourselves to own that, especially as a sensitive, as an intuitive sensitive, some of our lessons in life are actually about owning what's uncomfortable to the extent where we feel worthy of letting it pass through and heal. Quite often what we'll do is stop allowing ourselves to feel something and disassociate right at the point of a huge breakthrough. Now for Caitlin, I suspect that her body keeps taking her to that edge moment of doing that, because her back went into spasm where she couldn't move, which is very symbolic, hugely symbolic of this whole dynamic in this relationship. which is that she would have felt in her early life that she felt trapped enough where she couldn't move. Okay, so she couldn't move. So her body is trying to show her that sense of release. Now for her, right now, that sense of release is that actually her mother's characteristics were not Caitlin's fault. And sometimes, our lessons in life are about learning that actually it wasn't our fault. Even though, especially, if you have a narcissistic parent or had a narcissistic kind of foundation in your life, you've been trained to accept everything is your fault. And especially as a sensitive, because you will then hold it in your body and feel that somehow or another it is your fault. So for Caitlin, I would suggest that her first starting point is actually to kind of go in and mentally communicate with her back. She's a sensitive because you will then communicate with her body and say, feel that somehow or another it is your fault. So for Caitlin, I would suggest that her first starting point is actually to kind of go in and if she allows herself to do that, communicate. I would say that the grieving process will then communicate with her body. She'll then feel that somehow or another start to feel neutral. So for Caitlin, as far as the father is concerned, about this feeling of letdown or locked in. And then she will be open. And if she allows herself to do that, communicate. I would say that the so before we go on, will next study with her body. She'll then important message start to feel neutral. So for Caitlin, I would father whilst telling her about this feeling of letdown or locked in. And then, if you like the archetype, if she allows herself to do that, you're going to love. I would say the back. So before we go on, will next study with her body. She'll then. Hello, now we're back. So let's get into dilemma number 2. We have Alison, who is a life code 5. She's asking the question. And Alison is looking to help her son form a bond with his father, but without rushing in as the rescuer. Now, as a sensitive, we often like to do that, don't we? We like to rescue. So the husband is a life code 7. Interesting. We've got another life code 5, life code 7 dynamic. And the son is a life code 3. Okay, mental block for a second. Okay, so we have a life code 7, a life code 5, and a life code 3. Now, the interesting thing is that we're going to have touch into this life code 5 and life code 7 dynamic, but in a slightly different way, in that we've got one aware life code 5 and one unaware life code 7, and that has quite a strong implication as far as this relationship is concerned. Okay, so what has Alison told us about this relationship? So, my husband seems unable to form a connection with our son that is loving and stable. They are very different people, and sometimes it seems like our son can't be who my husband wants him to be. Our son suffers from severe anxiety and sometimes depression, which my husband appears to see as a weakness. So what's the problem the situation creates? I'm usually in the middle, trying to keep the peace and get them to understand each other. It's a great strain and sadness to me that we're a dysfunctional family. What is the question that Alison wants me to answer? Can I do anything to help bring them together without rushing to rescue, as most intuitive, sensitive people do? Okay, so Alison wants to know how she can support her family in terms of forming a bond and changing that dynamic from dysfunctional to functional. Okay, so life code to life code, what have we got as far as this is concerned, well, we have this life code 3, the sun. Now, generally, as a life code 3 anyway, life code 3s have a strong association with that sensitivity. They're also that female energy, okay? So there is this a strong line of female energy. They're exceptionally patient, and quite often won't say what they actually feel, so as not to upset or offend anyone, but they will hold it inside, which is clearly what's happening as far as this young lad is concerned. So what do we have that with this, a life code 3 with a life code 5? Well, it's going to be a dynamic which is at times highly supportive and at other times distancing. And that's going to be a constant kind of pull between the two. There will be a connection and distancing. Why? Because we've got a life code 5 parent, which is a life code 5. Anyway, we have this strong warrior feel, so feeling that you have to head up something to be that. But actually a life code 5's big thing in life, their big mission in life, is to overcome their own sense of uncertainty in themselves. Okay, why? Because they reflect the spiritual will. Okay, so it's about finding that part and finding that component of the self. So at the same time, within that, if there is weakness in another, it will make a life code 5 slightly uncomfortable, and they will have a compulsion to try and rescue that person because of that warrior. But at the same time, they don't want it highlighted too much in case it brings something up within themselves. So a life code 7, in terms of this unaware life code 7, well, as we've looked at previously in life code 5 and life code 7 dynamics, if in two unaware scenarios, they will gang up on somebody else, on a third person, to deflect from their own stuff. Now, what we actually have in this scenario is an unaware 7 in terms of the husband and an aware 5 as far as the mother is concerned. Okay, so as far as Alison is concerned, she is an aware 5. So actually she's already doing a lot to deflect what could be a ganging up situation on this young man otherwise. Okay, and this young life code 3 would otherwise be a ganging up situation. Now, a life code 3, if they are ganged up on, they will go. Okay, they will run out of patience and they will go, and be the last you see of them. Because when a life code 3 has had enough, they've properly had enough. They really have had enough. So, in actual fact, as far as this relationship is concerned, Alison, being an aware person and working to be aware, is actually keeping this family from complete dysfunction. Because otherwise what would happen is, yes, the 5 and the 7 would gang up on that 3, making that young man's life a nightmare, because all of the perceived weakness would be then kind of thrown at him. Now, why is the husband doing this? Okay, why does the husband see that this young lad's anxiety and his depression is weakness? Well, you can see this quite clearly in the life codes. Unaware 7s are terrified, absolutely terrified of their own weakness in terms of their own possibility into emotional collapse, depression, all of that. So in actual fact, what the husband is saying is that he's terrified that he is that fragile. And actually, I would say the son is made of stronger substance, because the son at least owns his anxiety and owns his depression. Okay, that's not weakness, that's actually bravery. So actually, in the long term, Alison can be certain and comfortable in the idea that actually her son is made of stronger stuff than her husband is. And that will surface as time moves forward. Now, the thing to be careful of or concerned about as a possibility is that the son, in recovering himself, will eventually disown the father. Because a life code 3 sorted out, had enough, patience has run out, will see actually that kind of behaviour, rejection of their own feelings to that extent, is not an energy that person wishes to be around. So, I would say the place that we need to start at is, how can Alison be true to herself and more true to her interaction with her son than she currently is able to be, because the husband his behaviour is unkind, and I'm going to say unkind, towards his own son. And there is a closeness in understanding here, because a 3, a 5 and an 8 may not always get on, but they are going to have a closer kind of understanding of each other, because on this side, 3, 5s and 8s are all pausing energy. Okay, so it's a reflection before action. 7s, 7, 4s and 2s, sometimes it can come out before they've thought. Okay, so I suspect that the husband here says a lot of things before he's actually thought about it, but he's not big enough to say, to apologise or say that he's sorry. So the key thing here, I think, is that we have a look at Alison and see what she can access within herself to be true to her bond and connection with her son. Okay, which I feel is there. It feels like it's strongly there, because the encouragement would kind of almost to be to reject his weakness, or his perceived weakness. That's how the husband sees it. Okay, so let's have a look and see what comes out. Right, so I'm thinking of Alison. Oh. Okay. So we have the thief, okay? Now, this is interesting as far as Alison is concerned, because she definitely feels with that thief that something is being stolen, okay? And what we have here is there's a showing of the heart kind of thing here inside the character's coat. So what does it mean? It means that Alison does feel that something is being taken from her, that emotionally this dynamic between her son and her husband is really destroying her. It's really upsetting her. But at the same time, she's not fully communicating that. Okay? So the husband is getting away with it. This is really deeply upsetting her, and feeling that the core essence of her being a mother is being undermined by this man's behaviour. Okay, that's what this thief would mean as far as that's concerned. So let's have a look and see really, what is this man up to? Why is he doing this? Why is he directing this like this towards his son? And maybe even have a look at what would stop him from doing that. So let's have a look and see what we have that comes up. Okay, we have the Queen. Interesting. He's doing it as punishment because he likes to be the centre of attention and feels that he's not. So he does this the most when he feels that he's not the centre of attention, and so therefore he's mean in order to bring him forward to being the centre of attention, either positive or negative. Now that suggests that he has the husband has some kind of issue from his own past, either with a sibling or with a parent, where he felt rejected enough to then feel that he's validated in rejecting his own child. Okay, and that's where that comes from. That's really quite clear. I'm going to say it's that clear. So what's going to happen as far as the sun is concerned? Let's have a look and see how the sun is around all of this. Okay, so we have the king here, and I think, as I said, he's stronger than we actually think, but I think also, not that he manipulates it, but I would say that there is a power dynamic, because we've got the king and the queen going on here, between father and son. Power dynamic as in who's going to get Alison's attention in a stronger way. It's a fight over who does she love the most. And sometimes we see this, sometimes you do see this, and being asked almost to choose between who do you love the most. And that's deeply painful as far as Alison is concerned. So how can Alison surface that? Well, she probably needs to look into her own past, because definitely her husband's got some things going on here. But I would say in terms of her own past, where she felt in the middle, and I would say probably between her own parent dynamic, or maybe a sibling and a parent, in order to surface that pain as far as that's concerned. So let's have a look, because I think we need to give something a little extra on top of this thief to see how can Alison resolve or begin to resolve personally within her own world this painful split and seeking of her attention between this power play between these two individuals, the two men in her life that she loves the most. See her son and her husband. Okay, so let's have a look. Interesting. So we have the prostitute again. This is interesting. Why have you got the prostitute? This is be about where she was taught in life to sell her energy to the highest bidder. Okay, so Alison needs to look into her own past and see, and that's a strong question: is which parent, which person that she loved them, which core part of her family in terms of her foundational experience did she feel that she had to sell out to the highest bidder? If she finds that and finds the emotional pain behind that, which is this thief, then this power play between her son and her husband will deteriorate, as in they won't be able to hold that power play between the two, because Alison will suddenly spark up that warrior and say, for crying out loud, you pack it in and you pack it in. And you be decent to him and he be decent to you. And let's find out what the core is of this anxiety and depression. And let's solve that through this level of communication. And you, husband, stop punishing our son, because he is still our son. And if you have an issue with your own owning of your own emotions, that's your deal. Right at this moment, if you were to say to Alison, say that, and it flushes it all out, she wouldn't be able to. She'd suddenly panic. So in order to find that, it is about finding deep down from her own past, and it will be parent, because it will be about authority. Which parent did she have to sell out to please the other? And that is that feeling of what's been taken from her that was heartbreaking back then. If she can move that out of her own body from where it's being stored, she will suddenly find that warrior be a lot more expressive as far as this dynamic is concerned, where she is not rescuer and certainly not the peacemaker. Then it will be about owning that truth. And sometimes in life that's what it's about. Sometimes it's about finding a core issue behind something that is the key to spring us free from what feels like a trap in that present moment. So before we move on to dilemma number 3, we have another important message from our sponsor, still me, whilst I clear the board. See you in a moment. to Sorry about the audio. I'll be back in a second. So let's get on to the third dilemma of today. So we have Rose, who is struggling with her health. Okay, so we have Rose, who's struggling with her health, and she is a life code 6. And we have her husband, who is a life code 5. So this is going to be about their relationship dynamics. So, what happens when you put a 5 and a 6 together? Well, let's have a look as far as that's concerned. So, what has Rose told us about this situation? I've recently come to understand that my husband is what is called an intimacy anorexic. After 14 years of a difficult marriage and some good therapy, we finally have the missing piece of the puzzle. We are both receiving help for this. I'm a highly sensitive, intuitive person who, before I met my husband, developed ME, chronic fatigue, after a round of inoculations for travel to Egypt in my 30s. I am now in my 50s. So what's the problem the situation creates? My health has never been good since. I believe the stress in my relationship has contributed to my bad health. My husband's behaviours in the past had destroyed my trust in him, which he has slowly been repairing in the last couple of years. However, I keep getting one health issue after another. So what is the question that you want me to answer? So what's the question that Rose wants me to answer? I'm now more hopeful about our future relationship than I have been for many years, but I'm worried about my health. Any advice? Okay, so Rose is asking to how to better her health within her current relationship dynamics. So in terms of life code to life code, what do we have here? Well, life code 6. Life code 6s always like to be, they are the centre of things. So they've got lots of life paths that move in towards them. So they are often, life code 6s are very sociable. They like strong relationship dynamics. They love to feel secure within the centre of those relationship dynamics. So anything less than that is deeply disruptive for them. Okay, it's often, really quite disruptive for them. Now, a life code 5, anyway, we're working with that warrior again, the silent warrior, the lone crusader. Often the life code 5 is about learning to manage their own will, but it is also that lone wolf, lone crusader, lone energy. And that, with a life code 6, is very hard, because for a life code 6, it will impact them far more than it will do that life code 5. Why? Because that life code 5, when they want some kind of nurturing or comfort, they'll go to that life code 6, get what they need, and then go away again. And clearly this is what's been happening in this relationship dynamic. So before we move ahead as far as this dilemma is concerned, let me explain a little bit. What does intimacy anorexic mean? Well, when I first read this, I hadn't come across the term before either. I would find that you probably haven't come across this term. But what does it mean? Intimacy anorexic. It's actively withholding from a relationship, but regardless of the pain to themselves or their spouse, they continue. Okay, so to quote, I would say, I think this is the person who created this intimacy anorexic term, Dr. Doug Weiss, intimacy anorexic marriage. An intimacy anorexic marriage slowly dies even though the marriage looks good from the outside. Now, there's quite a lot of description as far as intimacy anorexic is concerned, that I had a look at, as far as this energy's description. And from what I can ascertain, just purely from the description of it, I would actually say intimacy anorexia is another word for emotionally abusive in on different levels. But something that maybe, where someone is owning that, it's an energy that can be resolved. And I would say probably that if Rose's husband is owning that, for a life code 5, that's really hard. So he must really want to. He must really, really want to. So that suggests that his dynamic with Rose is that he does actually really love her, because he's actually making that effort to. He's actually going as far as that's concerned, just as long as it's not lip service. Okay, that it's not for him to acquire the temporary connection that he needs in order to keep her there. And whether Rose's health complaints is an unconscious knowledge that actually it's a kind of matter of time, and that part of his agreement to resolve this is all to do with actually him just needing what he needs and then being able to emotionally disappear again completely. So but still be married. So whether he comes back in order to keep her there, I think we probably need to have a little look at that, because again, saying that intimacy anorexic actively withholds from a relationship, but regardless of the pain to the self or spouse, they continue. Okay, so let's have a look as far as that's concerned. Okay, so if what the husband is actually up to, and see whether it is that it's purely that's having this strong impact as far as Rosie's health is concerned, because of that life code 6, she does actually need healthy emotional connections with other people, very much as that life code 6. And let's have a look, see what the husband is up to. So, thinking of the husband, let's have a look. Okay, so this is interesting. We have the husband as the goddess. Okay, so I would slightly interpret that as passive aggressive. He wants to be the centre of attention, and currently at the moment this intimacy anorexic stuff puts him as that centre of attention. Okay, so let's have a little look and see what impact that is having on Rose. Though it's not entirely conscious, let's have a look and see what it's doing. Is her system coping with it, or is it not coping? Let's have a little look. So we have the lover. Okay, so I would say what we have here is there is an element of compatibility, as in what's kind of connecting these two people, because the goddess and the lover are compatible energies. Okay, so on an unconscious level is compatible, but I would be slightly suspicious here and be looking at it along the lines of, is this a codependence situation? So in actual fact, are both of them avoiding at some level or another an emotional intimacy through fear? Okay, we've already established that the husband wants to be the centre of attention. What is going on as far as Rose is concerned? What's she afraid of? If she really had a present and attentive husband, what kind of impact would that have? Would she be scared or would she be comfortable with it? Let's have a little look and find out and see whether there is anything blocking that level of transformation. Let's have a look. Okay, interesting. So what we have here is Rose's default setting is the peacemaker. Okay, but it will be in sort of slightly other ways. It won't be as in people pleasing the husband. It will be as in trying to create peace. And I would say the reason that her body is rebelling is it's because it's saying to her, actually, I don't always want to create peace. Actually, I want to stir this pot a bit because I want to be the centre of things. I want to be the centre of attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. Why isn't it at times I can be somebody's centre of attention, someone's goddess, someone's meaningful person? Why do I have to be this peacemaker? Why do I have to be this person who makes this all right? Because actually it was me that has given this man this kind of all, and that I'm still here, when most people, quite frankly, with what I read as the description as an intimacy anorexic, would have left a long time ago. Because to that kind of level, that's a lot of your life used up with someone who will not give. So actual fact, Rosie's body is saying to her, I'm sick of being this peacemaker. I don't want to be a peacemaker anymore. I want to be the centre of someone's attention. And if they don't want to give it to me, I'm going to fight back by showing you that my body doesn't like this. It doesn't like not being worthy of someone's attention. And that's why, and it's saying it to Rose, which is, why am I not, as your body, worthy of your attention? And my body is saying to you that I need to be worthy. I need to be this lover. I need to feel connection. It needs to feel connection. So let's have a look and see what Rose can include in her life where she can feel this connection, where she's not looking for it from a husband who's clearly not going to be able to offer it, really, because he needs to be the centre of attention. So what is it? What's this extra aspect that Rose needs to find for herself so that her body will stop taking her into health complaints? Let's have a little look and see what we can find. Okay, so thinking of that, and let's see what we've got. We have the saboteur. Okay, now this is interesting. It doesn't mean, well, what is Rose doing to sabotage? Because she doesn't do things to sabotage. She is the peacemaker. She's the one to make it solvable, to make it all just fine. She's the one to do that. So this saboteur is talking about, well, in actual fact, this peacemaker scenario is the saboteur. Okay, this is the peacemaker thing, is the saboteur. In actual fact, it's not the lover part that's destroying her inner world, it's the lack of feeling this level of connection, which is having a direct impact on her health. And so it may well be, and only time will tell, that Rose does decide that as that life code 6, she needs more than what this relationship dynamic can ever give her. And it may well be at that point, when her body is communicated enough's enough, that she gives a very clear indication to her husband. And it may well be right at that point, when someone knows that the core point of that person means it, that's when that person really steps up. And it's not until that point do we see a fundamental adjustment or fundamental change sometimes? So sometimes, if we look at it as far as our life lesson is concerned, what does it mean? Well, sometimes we have a core of who we actually are. And that sometimes when our body is upset, what it's actually talking to us about is that we're going against the core of what we actually need. And sometimes the core of what we actually need isn't a bad thing. And sometimes we need to respect that core part of ourselves, rather than try and fight it and go against it, and rather than try to be this forever peacemaker of what? Peacemaker of a loyalty that, in this scenario, a loyalty that needs to be stronger, because it's a one-way scenario as far as Rose is concerned. She has a strong loyalty, but this loyalty needs to be a two-way dynamic as far as her relationship is concerned. But more importantly, that loyalty needs to be a two-way dynamic as far as herself is concerned, between her mind and her body. So that's the end of this episode of the Sensitive Mind Show. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, do share it with your friends. So to be sure to join me next week, where I will be looking forward to giving you an alternative perspective on your relationship dilemmas. Bye for now, and let me leave you with this. Designed to support your purchase of my book, Highly Intuitive People, 7 Right Brain Traits. Sorry about the sound again, and bye for now.